There is a gauge that quietly measures fear in the metals market, and it just did something it almost never does. Not the price. The financial channels will talk about the price all day because the price is easy, the price fits in a headline, and the price keeps you staring at the wrong thing. This is deeper than the price. It is a signal that shows up maybe once in a generation, and when it turns, it has historically marked the exact moment the crowd was most wrong. The big banks and the trading desks understand this signal perfectly well. They just have no interest in explaining it to you, because your confusion is where their profit lives. If you are holding silver right now, or you have been thinking about it, or you have a retirement account you have worked a lifetime to build, I need you to slow down and give me the rest of this video. Because what I am about to walk you through is not about tomorrow's tick or next week's close. It is about a rare turn in the machinery underneath the metal, the part the headlines skip. And by the end, you will understand what it is actually telling us and what it is not. So let me give you something concrete right up front, because I do not believe in making you wait for the whole meal. There is a ratio in this market that tells you how many ounces of silver it takes to buy a single ounce of gold. Think of it as a fear thermometer. When people are terrified, they crowd into gold and they abandon silver, and that ratio spikes to extremes. And here is the tell most people never hear on the news. For most of modern history, that thermometer has run in a fairly normal band. Only at the rarest, most panicked moments does it blow out to a reading almost no living investor has seen. It reached one of those readings, and then it began to turn. That turn, not the price, is the whole story of this video. Let me take you back to the spring of 2020, because that is the clearest picture of what this signal looks like, and it is the spine of everything I am going to tell you. The world locked down almost overnight. Fear was not a number on a screen. It was a physical thing you could feel in the grocery store, in the empty streets, in the voice of every anchor on television. And in the metals market, something extraordinary happened. Gold held up. Silver got absolutely crushed. Not because anyone decided silver was worthless, but because in a genuine panic, the market treats gold as the lifeboat and dumps everything else to raise cash. When people are truly frightened, they do not sell what is falling. They sell what they can, whatever is liquid, to get their hands on dollars. Silver, which is half money and half industrial metal, got thrown overboard with the industrial stuff, tossed out with everything tied to a real economy that had just been switched off. And that fear thermometer, the gold-silver ratio, spiked toward a reading up near 125 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. I want you to sit with how strange that is. For centuries, the natural relationship between the two metals sat somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or 16 to 1, because that is roughly how they come out of the ground. Even in the modern era, a normal reading has been a fraction of what we saw in that panic. A ratio up near 125 is not a price, it is a scream. It is the market telling you that fear had reached a level that simply does not last. And it did not last. Here is the part the crowd missed, standing there staring at the falling price. From that extreme, silver did not just recover. Silver outran gold. The metal everyone had left for dead came roaring back off the lows, and it moved faster than gold on the way up, and that thermometer compressed hard and fast. The people who understood the signal were not watching the price bottom. They were watching the fear reading blow out to a once-in-decades extreme, and they understood what that historically means. The price told you where silver had been. The ratio told you where the fear had gone, and fear that extreme has a way of reversing. Now, why does the crowd miss this every single time? Because the crowd watches the price, and the price is designed to hurt you at exactly the wrong moment. When that ratio was screaming its highest, the silver price on the screen looked like a disaster. Every instinct in a frightened saver's body said, "Sell, get out, protect what is left." And that is precisely the moment the signal underneath was flashing the opposite message. The financial media will never frame it this way for you, because a falling price and a scary headline keep you clicking and keep you churning, and your churn is somebody's paycheck. Let me introduce you to someone, because I want you to feel this and not just hear it. Picture a man in his early 60s, a careful saver, the kind who reads the statements and does the math. Through that panic, he owned a little silver, a small piece of a retirement he had built one paycheck at a time. And every day the price fell, he felt like a fool. He watched the number drop and he thought, I did everything right and I am being punished for it. What he could not see, because nobody put it in front of him, was that fear thermometer screaming a once-in-a-generation reading right above his head. If he had understood that signal instead of the price, the worst day of his fear would have looked like the best day of his opportunity. That gap between what the price says and what the signal says is the entire reason I make these videos. And this is the right place to stop for a moment and talk about protecting what you have built, because that man's story is not really about silver. It is about not being forced to sell the wrong thing at the wrong time. Here is something the biggest, most sophisticated buyers on earth already understand. The central banks, the institutions that manage entire nations' savings, have been buying gold at a pace we have not seen in generations, more than 1,000 tons a year for 3 straight years, roughly double what they bought the decade before. They are not doing that to get rich. They are doing it to hold something that cannot be printed and cannot be frozen by another country's decision. Now, here is the part almost nobody tells the ordinary retiree. There is a perfectly legal, established way for you to do the very same thing the central banks are doing inside the retirement account you already have. You can move a portion of an existing IRA or 401k into physical gold and silver, real metal held for you in an insured vault, without triggering taxes and without triggering penalties, using what is called a self-directed precious metals IRA. It is the same account you already own, just holding something that cannot be printed. And I want to be clear about who this is for, because this is not some velvet rope club for insiders, and it is not just for the wealthy. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, a 401k, a traditional IRA, an old plan from a job you left years ago, this is squarely for you. I put together a free guide that walks through exactly how it works, step by step, in plain language. No jargon and no obligation. If you are watching this on your television, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. It costs you nothing and it commits you to nothing. Now, let me get back to the signal, because this is where it gets important. The obvious question is whether that 2020 turn was a one-off, a fluke of a strange year. It was not. It was the clearest recent example of a pattern that repeats across the history of these two metals. When real fear peaks, silver gets punished harder than gold. The ratio blows out. And then, when the fear drains, silver historically comes back faster than gold, and the ratio compresses. The extreme reading is the fingerprint of a bottom in sentiment. Not a guaranteed bottom in price on a given day, but a bottom in the emotion that drives the price. An emotion that extreme is, almost by definition, unsustainable. But here is the part that actually changes things. The part Juan promised you and almost nobody gets to. A rare fear signal by itself is just a mood. What makes this moment different from a simple mood swing is that the mood is sitting on top of a hard physical shortage. The silver market has run a structural supply deficit for several straight years now. The world is using more silver than it is digging up, year after year, and the gap has been filled by drawing down stockpiles that are not infinite. And unlike gold, which gets hoarded and sits in vaults essentially forever, silver gets consumed. It goes into solar panels and electronics in tiny, scattered amounts, a fraction of a gram here, a fraction of a gram there, and it is almost never economical to recover. Gold is hoarded. Silver is burned. That is the difference that matters. So think about what that means. You have a fear thermometer that periodically blows out to a once-in-decades extreme and then reverses. And underneath it, you have a metal in a genuine multi-year physical shortage being quietly consumed and not replaced. One of those things is about emotion. The other is about atoms. When a sentiment signal and a supply reality point in the same direction, you are looking at something more durable than a mood swing. That is the combination the price watchers cannot see, because the price only shows them today. Let me give you one more piece of history, because it deepens the point. Silver has a ceiling that is held for a very long time, a level up near $50 an ounce that it has touched only twice in living memory, once at the top in 1980 and again decades later in 2011, roughly 31 years apart. And here is the detail almost no one mentions. If you adjust that 1980 high for everything the dollar has lost since, the real peak was far above $50, well into the low 3 figures in today's money, and silver has never once reclaimed it in real terms. Think about that. A metal in a structural shortage, consumed and not recycled, still sitting below where it traded in real value decades ago. That is not a market that has gotten ahead of itself. That is a market that has been asleep. Now, why should you trust the physical signal over the price at all? Because the price you see on the screen is mostly a paper price, a market of claims and contracts, and paper can be created out of thin air in a way that atoms cannot. We have watched this collide with reality more than once. There was a moment when a crowd tried to squeeze the silver market by buying paper claims, and it failed because buying more paper just manufactures more paper. And on another exchange, in another metal entirely, when the paper price and the physical reality finally diverged too far, the exchange simply canceled completed trades, erased them, when metal won and paper lost. That is worth remembering the next time someone tells you the screen price is the truth. The screen price is a truth about paper. The shortage is a truth about metal. And the fear gauge is a truth about people. Only one of those three can be conjured up by a keystroke. Now I want to be honest with you, because that man at his kitchen table deserves honesty, and so do you. This is a case, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. Silver is volatile. It can be gut-wrenching. The same metal that comes roaring back can also be slammed for reasons that have nothing to do with its real value. We have watched exchanges hike the cost of holding silver positions and knock the price down by around 30% in a matter of days while nothing about the metal itself changed. Not the shortage, not the demand, not a single physical fact. The rules under a paper market can be rewritten by the people who run it, and they are not written for your benefit. If you cannot stomach that kind of move, silver will shake you out at the worst possible time, which is exactly what it is designed to do. The violence is a feature, not a bug, because a frightened holder selling into the drop is how the metal gets transferred from weak hands to patient ones. Anyone who tells you it only goes up is selling you something, and anyone who tells you the next drop means the story is over does not understand the story at all, which is why the how of owning it matters as much as the whether. If you decide silver belongs in your plan, own the real metal, not a paper promise that somebody else can redefine when it becomes inconvenient. Size the position so that a sharp drop is uncomfortable but never catastrophic, so that a shakeout can never force you to sell at the bottom the way that Saver almost did. The people who get destroyed in this metal are not the ones who are wrong about the direction. They are the ones who are right about the direction but sized so large or so leveraged that a normal, violent pullback forces them out before the payoff. Position size is what lets you hold your conviction when the screen is trying to scare you out of it. Now let me tell you where we really are, because this is the recognition moment, and it is the whole reason understanding this signal matters right now. The smart money already sees it. The central banks are buying gold hand over fist. The sophisticated players understand the ratio, understand the deficit, understand what a fear extreme historically precedes. They are already positioned, but the mainstream has not caught on. The financial channels are still fixated on the daily price. Your neighbor is not talking about the gold-silver ratio at the dinner table. The pension funds and the big advisors have not made their move. There is no line around the block at the coin shop, no mania, no cab driver giving you silver tips. And that is exactly the point. By the time this becomes obvious to everyone, by the time it leads the news and every advisor is recommending it and your neighbor finally brings it up, the easy part of the move will already be behind us. The whole advantage of understanding a rare signal is understanding it before the crowd arrives. Nobody is going to call you and tell you the moment has come. Nobody sends you an invitation to be early. The invitation is the quiet stretch when nothing feels urgent, when it is still just a strange reading on a gauge nobody is watching. That quiet is not a reason to ignore it. That quiet is the opportunity. So let me answer the question this whole video is built on, plainly and honestly. Silver just flashed a signal we have not seen in decades. And that signal is not the price. It is the rare turn in the fear gauge underneath the price. It is the reading that historically marks the moment the crowd was most afraid and most wrong. And it is sitting on top of a real, physical, multi-year shortage of the metal. That does not promise you a price, and it does not promise you a date. What it tells you is that the setup the smart money watches for is on the table, and the mainstream has not noticed yet. That is what it means. And now you understand it, which puts you ahead of almost everyone still staring at the number on the screen. If you have watched this far, you are exactly the kind of person I made this next part for. For those of you with $100,000 or more in a retirement account who want to think this through carefully, I am offering a free one-on-one educational web conference. No script, no pressure, just a real conversation about whether physical gold and silver belong in your plan and how the tax-free rollover actually works for your situation. If you are watching on your television, scan the QR code on your screen right now. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com and mention that you watched this all the way to the end. And here is the honest reason to do it now rather than later. The moment to make a calm, unhurried decision is precisely the moment when nothing feels like an emergency, when you are early and thinking clearly instead of late and reacting. That window is open right now, while the gauge is still just a whisper the crowd is ignoring. So think back to that careful saver at his kitchen table, staring at a falling number, feeling like a fool, with a once-in-a-generation signal screaming silently right above his head. The tragedy was never that he owned silver. The tragedy was that nobody showed him the difference between the price and the signal. You have seen it now. You know that the fear gauge just did something it only does once in a generation, and you know what that has historically meant. The crowd is still watching the price. You are watching the thing underneath it. And that, more than any number on any screen, is what it means to be early.